And we're going to be focusing on episode 3 and 4 in particular, and this is going to be regarding Lady Triue and her connection with her daughter. There's going to be a bit of a deep dive, if you will, from a spiritual standpoint regarding the science behind ancestral continuity and trauma. So the first part of this, I'm titled this, "If you don't like my story, write your own," and that's something that Lady Triue said. Okay, and so when she premieres in these episodes, okay, she emerges as basically like a modern scientist per se. She is somebody that has like advanced science. She has drones and all these things, and basically she is a descendant of the rider of the pale horse, and we're going to get deeper into the aspect of him on another share. But when it comes to this, the connection that I'm seeing within the relationship between her and her daughter, there's a lot of ancestral remembrance, including her retelling of a particular dream. Another thing too I noticed was that she has a connection also to the grandfather of Sister Night, representing Angela Abar. Okay, emphasis on angel in the name. She has a connection with her grandfather, so there's this whole ancestral thread and memory, and also like a collective sense of shared trauma is what I'm picking up on in this. And so when it comes to this tower that she created in Oklahoma, okay, this stands as a monument, not just about power, but about lineage. Keep in mind that she also visited a couple and spoke about legacy, or the lack thereof of legacy. But the tricky thing about this is that she was introducing the possibility of this couple having a legacy through genetic modification, through basically creating like a hybrid baby per se. And so as we delve a little bit into this from a spiritual lens, Lady Triue's obsession with legacy and perfection mirrors not only metaphysical principles in regarding to like your soul has ability to remember certain things that may be unresolved, and it is not for you to be tormented by these memories, but from an ancestral standpoint, we are basically versions of our ancestors. And when we remember certain things, it is basically like our cellular memory is being activated. So it is kind of like, if you think about a run and you're passing the baton, so it's like they're passing the baton for you to go further, basically, from a mental standpoint. And so when it came to her daughter, telling her that, she had this really vivid dream, and, she even felt like a physiological response, like she remembered her feet hurting. Keep in mind that this particular lady was from a Vietnamese origin. And if you're familiar with a lot of things that happened to their people, they were really objectified, and they were forced to have these very long walks. Okay, and so hence lies the connection of the pain that the grandfather experienced being a survivor of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and Lady Triue creating this major monument in Oklahoma. Okay, again, all this is based on fiction, but it does have its threads to reality. When it comes to her daughter, Bian, okay, her dream, which was actually a lived experience of Lady Triue's mother, this symbolizes epigenetic haunting. Okay, and so this is basically like our trauma is stored within our psyche alone. So for instance, you may have a fond memory even of ancestors that you're not even familiar with per se on a personal level, but you have this strong remembrance of something that they may have gone through, because in some aspects you are those ancestors. You're just a younger version per se. So the haunting memory you have, like say for instance, if you had ancestors that experienced something very painful and it feels as if it's your own memory, indeed it is. Okay. Dr. Jewel Pookrum, I definitely want to give her a lot of credit because I've learned a lot from her. One thing that I picked up from my lineage is that whenever we were going through something and it may have seemed uncertain or traumatic, instead of delving into things that may be counterproductive, we were encouraged to, for instance, to read, to draw, to do different things. So what seemed like a punishment at the time became a positive way of dealing with trauma and stress. And so, similar as I mentioned about Dr. Jewel Pookrum, she talks about how you could actually improve your legacy, your lineage, through actually taking on positive aspects of dealing with said traumas, whether that is reading about things, creating about certain things, writing. This is how you improve your cellular memory, okay, so that your coming generations can also be an improvement. And so, similar when it comes to Lady Triue, okay, she basically was encouraging her daughter to not only relive those versions of ancestral pain and trauma through her dreams, but to, allow herself to actually move through those feelings by honoring it and not just dismissing it. Sometimes when our children or even ourselves, if we experience like a haunting memory or a dream, oftentimes it's easier just to say, oh, just forget about it, just dismiss it. But life happens in circular motion, so it's in spirals. So if you don't honor the memory of that and actually process it, it's going to cycle around in some aspect. And unfortunately, if you're trying to ignore it, it may cycle back around in the form of anger, rage, sadness, depression, all those things. And so as we move forward in this message, I want to focus more so on how we have the ability to transmute trauma without actually being in full control of it, okay? And this is also in regard to Lady Triue, who is similar to kind of like an archetype of a woman scientist per se, a mother scientist, because she represents not only the healer but the destroyer. Keep in mind that she is in this film. Well, it's not a film, it is only one season, but she is, thank you, get it at 12:37. She is a descendant also of the man that rides the pale horse. So it shows that she has genetic imprintation of him as well. So this, okay, basically what I'm trying to convey to you is that, okay, if you are within the Americas, more than likely you're going to have some level of admixture in your DNA. Okay, that's just what it is through years of colonization. But it's not for you to allow yourself to resonate with self-hatred. A positive reframe that I found is becoming familiar, even if you're not 100% sure of your genetic makeup, but basically become familiar with things that actually you like, that may be from a different demographic, and embrace those things so that you can reconcile that portion of your genetics with positive associations, opposed to just focusing on the fact that oftentimes it was not a welcome invitation for us to be procreating with these people. That's just the truth. That's the truth of the matter. That's just a little tip that I can give you to help you, come to a place of accepting yourself, your whole version of yourself, okay? And so if we move into this next phase of this message, I want to get into the symbolism of the couple. There was a couple on season 4, and I titled this one The Couple's Covenant. Okay, so this is a intersection between fertility and genetic survival. So in this same episode, this couple was presented by Lady Triue in exchange for their land and their 40 acres. Again, that has undertones to the promise that we as indigenous Americans or people of African descent was given, and it wasn't upheld. But she alluded to that, and this also represents too the importance of legacy. she also presented them to basically have like a GMO child. Okay, so although it may seem as if it is a gesture of improving, your lineage, but it came with baby basically some, wow, I didn't even mean to say that, but through them having a GMO child or baby, that kind of comes with a trick, because it's not natural. And so hence lies basically the deception when it comes to colonization. But they had a interesting way of remixing it for it to come in a version of a Vietnamese woman with a couple that were of European descent. Okay, and so another thing too I want to go to in this whole interpretation I get from these episodes is in regarding to Genesis 25:29 through 34, which speaks about biblical Esau selling his birthright for a meal. And so in order for Lady Triue to acquire that land, she basically bribed them with something that really was not of God's natural design. Because truly a child is not just DNA, it is destiny. It is a living continuum of our being. And so for the sake of genetic survival, this represents that these people were being manipulated in order to not only give something to Lady Triue that she really wanted, which was the land. Again, another what's it called? Easter egg is what they call it. And again, in this series, show, they had a lot of so-called Easter eggs alluding to things that were of significance and important during this time. So let's move on to phase 3 of this. Let's focus on the restoration code. Okay, this is in regarding to healing ancestral trauma through conscious creation. So at the core of Watchmen episode 4, it is really about reprogramming your cell's code. And what this is the ability to rewrite your history, not through denial, not through suppression, but through being really conscious. I want to also share in regarding to Angela Abar, who was depicted by Regina King in this, Sister Night. Her alter ego was a vigilante at night. And this is also akin to how she kind of wanted to reject the memories of her grandfather. She was, kind of cold towards him. She kept trying to push him away, but he kept coming back in her memory because it was important for her to move forward in her life. There was a lot of insight that he had to give to her, but she was not wanting to accept it. She was wanting to reject it. However, even though she was trying to reject the ancestral memory of her grandfather, who ended up being an officer, he ended up being somebody that really wanted to right wrongs or seek justice, because he experienced a lot of injustice. And ironically, although she was trying to push this aspect of herself away, she too was on night shift, basically being a vigilante for justice per se. Okay, so this definitely mirrors why it's so important to come to some type of respect and honor for all aspects of your genetic makeup, whether it was forced on you or not. If you can find the silver lining in it, then you can move into true wholeness and allow yourself to move out of different versions of self-hatred. Okay, and so another thing too I want to get into regarding this is Lady's True Tower. Okay, this represented the millennial clock, and to me this represented like the obelisk. If you're not familiar with that, that was representing basically the dominance of masculinity. Okay, and so for Lady Triue to actually erect this obelisk in Oklahoma, it shows the power of what is the personification of Christ incarnate, the divine masculine, coming into this new reality. And keep in mind too, she had somewhat of a connection to the grandfather she was trying to basically convince the grandfather to not give up on connecting with the granddaughter, representing as Sister Knight, Angela Abar. And so this is all the correlation of just being in sync with the different generations within your bloodline, because what happens is that it allows you to actually be a higher version of who you were already designed to be before colonization, before oppression eased its way in, or forced its way in rather. And so I want to share a few affirmations in regard to this really heavy show. Like, it's packed with so much truth, and they have a little comedy in there too, but it was really brilliantly executed for sure. So let's begin. I am in alignment with my lineage. I transmute ancestral pain into divine purpose. My womb, my mind, and my DNA carry the frequency of restoration and renewal. I no longer am entrapped by my ancestors' trauma. I resurrect the truth and wisdom from it. I am the living millennial clock aligned with divine time, not inherited fear. To this next portion of this message, all right, we're going to focus in on the millennial clock. This is regarding quantum reincarnation and resurrection of memory. So in episode 3 and 4, we were introduced to Lady Triue, all right, and she was basically the creator of this whole millennial clock. Okay, this rose up, basically they put this up in Oklahoma, and it representing being an oracle, okay, a synthesis of true divine intelligence. So the ordinary eye, like people just looking at this thing, it just looks like just this advanced sci-fi-ish architectural design, but this had a lot of spiritual and cosmic significance, because it's representing being a timekeeper of your soul's memory. And in this particular episode 4, the clock is said to remind us of who we are. Okay, this goes into ancient hermetics and all these teachings, but all of these things really are about your life is basically like in a spiral. So even things that your ancestors may have gone through, in some aspects you will, and it's not necessarily for you to constantly be focused on those traumas, but to focus on the triumphs. Think about, especially within this particular show, although it has some markers of true history, some of it is fiction, but the truth of the matter is that a lot of those that survive very traumatic things, like for instance the memory of Lady Triue and her mother, and the grandfather represented as Will. They also alluded to Bass Reeves. Okay, there's a lot of power and strength to have survived those things and still come out loving. That definitely should be a testament of your true strength. And so this so-called millennial clock is also reminiscent of like collective consciousness. It has like the look of an eye, which represents the pineal gland, which also represents actually moving to truly being highly, not only intelligent just to know stuff, but so that you can actually be the best version of yourself as a human. So Lady Triue, she also focused on, within this particular episode, she focused on how basically she could come to a sense of overcoming the things that her mother went through in the form of her child. So instead of her discouraging her child, she kind of encouraged her daughter to basically be wise and to process things that was coming up. Okay, and so all of this is an aspect of quantum reincarnation. Okay, this suggests that our consciousness does not move just linear, okay, in time. And Lady Triue, although she, kind of introduced cloning in this with this genetically modified child, okay, this also gives insight into the fact that her daughter Bian was basically a reincarnation of her mother. All right, so this is kind of like a quantum loop going on. Like her daughter basically was mothering her, and if you pay attention, her daughter exhibited a level of maturity that the mother did not. So sometimes we have to kind of parent our parents, and I know it sounds backwards, but that's an aspect of soul evolution. That's an aspect of, growing as a human. Sometimes your parents may go through things that could be so devastating that they're not necessarily able to get out of the loop of, their behaviors. Okay. So let's move on to our next phase of this, which is regarding to the divine timing. Understanding that the moment you begin to remember certain things, that shows that you are evolving. Okay, it is not a curse, it's really a gift. And this is also in biblical terms. Okay, this is in regarding to the alignment of Ecclesiastes 3, which says to everything there is a season. So